Hello, YouTube. I have described this strange, fascinating, cryptic Central Asian plateau in my other videos. I think it's one of the most unusual places on this planet. I ask that you please see the playlist Central Asia. You'll find a link to it. It's in my channel. But you see, it's not only the UFOs, aliens, and Soviet top secret military and academic research program that are associated with this location. Oh no, there is so much more, dating back thousands of years. What I'll tell you today is from my files from 1997. There are many places on the planet Earth that are outwardly open, seemingly easily accessible, but in reality so isolated that a human foot has hardly set its footprint in that area until now. If you look at the map of Asia, then east of the Caspian Sea, you can easily find the Ustyurt Plateau. It's a giant table that rises an average of 120 to 180 meters above sea level and stretches all the way to the Aral Sea. Despite the fact that a railway and a gas pipeline were laid through the northern tip of the plateau in the early 1970s, that gas and potash salts are extracted here, Ustyurt still remains one of the most lifeless territories on this planet. Compared to it, the unpleasant Karakum Desert spread out in the neighborhood are basically, it's truly a garden of paradise. It is not for nothing that local people, the Karakalpaks and the Turkmens, say, Barsa Kelmes. If you go there, you will not come back. By the way, that's also the name of one of the islands in the Aral Sea, which has its own strange paranormal history. And I also have spoken about it in a video some years ago. But the narrator that we will refer to, Nichiporenko, did not compellingly insist on the account of the authenticity of the sand monster of the Ustyurt. And yet, you see, Valery Nichiporenko first heard about it in 1972. At that time, as a young expert in the construction of high voltage lines, he was sitting one day with a team of installers at the Akchalak station, train station. This was the name of a tiny siding on the railroad that had just been built to the Ustyurt, along which regular train traffic had not yet begun. It was Saratan, the hottest period of summertime. The sun, as if mocking, heated the already cracked, hard as concrete earth. The salt seemed to protrude even on the rails, which could not be touched. It was that hot. Far away on the horizon, steep ledges, chinky, turned yellow. The team crowded around the short train that arrived once every 2 weeks on Thursdays. The locomotive rolled in from Kungrad. It had a tank of warm brackish water and a store car, a merchandise car, you could say, with an unchanged assortment of foods and other products: bread, canned fish, pasta, tea, and cigarettes. Well, suddenly there was a surprised exclamation. Someone from their team noticed that 3 dots were moving along the crest of the Chinki. For a moment, they forgot about shopping. After all, for a month and a half in that direction, Nichiporenko did not even happen to see a soaring bird. Nothing. It must have been an hour and a half when a small procession approached the passing truck. In front of it walked a lean nomad in a dusty cotton robe and a high sheep's hat, so ancient that his face seemed to consist of nothing but wrinkles. He was leading a loaded 2-humped camel, and he himself walked with that unhurried ease that distinguishes people who are used to covering dozens of kilometers on foot every day. Well, on the second camel sat majestically a plump middle-aged woman in a long dress, a black velvet vest, and brown ichigas, the light oriental boots. Her head was tied with a colorful scarf, but her broad Asiatic face remained open. Nomadic women never wore a veil. The third camel brought up the rear, on which on that camel sat a man of indeterminate age, extremely emaciated. He swayed between the humps like a Chinese swaying doll, risking falling off. On his head was a crumpled straw hat, while his clothes deserved to be called rags. The camels trod in the wake, although there was an immense expanse around. According to local custom, the nomads invited travelers to the table. They explained themselves by gestures because nomads, as a rule, do not understand Russian at all, or maybe they just pretend they did not understand. "My God, did I really get here?" the third traveler suddenly exclaimed in purest Russian, and he sobbed. Nechiporensko's team stared in amazement. His whitish eyelashes and especially his snub nose gave him away as a Slav. At the table, he told them his amazing story. Here is his narrative. "My name is Alexander Guslyanikov, Alec for short. I myself am from Leningrad, and I came to Kungrad for 2 years for hire. Got a job as a driver in the Department of Mechanization. The week before last, my boss calls me and says, 'Alec, my relatives from the Caucasus bought a car for me. We need to get it delivered here. Will you take the task?' I agreed without hesitation. Why not see new places? I got to Baku by plane and took the car from there, a brand new milky-colored Volga, and boarded a ferry to Krasnovodsk with it. Then I intended to go through Ashgabat, Mari, Charju, Tashauz. What a detour. On the ferry, to my misfortune, I got together with a Turkmen from Konya-Urgench, a good man. His name was Kurban. He was also driving a car, a Moskvich, and therefore we were fellow travelers. When he found out about my plans, he laughed. 'Why go through Mari? We'll go directly, 4 times shorter.' 'How directly? I'm surprised.' 'Through Ustyurt or what?' 'Of course.' 'What are you doing? We'll get lost.' 'Don't be afraid, the steam one. Many people go through Ustyurt. I went 3 times myself. There is a road track. There are signs. We just need to keep moving and stay away from the sands." He spoke with such confidence that I not only agreed, but I also caught fire with his idea. I am generally groovy. In short, when a day later we entered the port of Krasnovodsk, I was firmly set on the short road. Early in the morning, we set off, but as soon as we drove away from Krasnovodsk, the Moskvich engine started to rattle. Kurban had to stay. Foolish me, I should have turned back, but no. I'm telling you, a groovy character. Moreover, Kurban supported me. He drew a diagram, marked landmarks on it, explained everything. Stick to the track and everything will be fine. Even a child will pass that way. But at the parting, he warned again, be afraid of the sands. Something is fishy there. And here I was in the Ustyurt. Nothing caused concern. I confidently drove through the salt marshes and takirs, lowering the windows. Only at high speed it was possible to escape from the merciless heat. There were often the puhlaks, a kind of lake of the smallest weightless dust, in which the car could sink along with the axis. Before the puhlaks, the road was divided into dozens of branches. Each driver was looking for a more suitable detour. Behind the puhlaks, The branches converged into a single channel again. The main track was well rolled. It seemed impossible to get off it. The signs indicated by Kurban appeared exactly as told, a geodesic sign made of antiseptic soaked logs, a pole with a faded rag on top, a pile of stones, a lonely rock, a bolt tire. Gradually my eyes began to close. Nevertheless, the day before, I spent almost 2 sleepless nights, and the monotony of the landscape lulled to sleep. Suddenly, at the very edge of my fading conscience, I realized that I was dreaming, and for a long time. Abruptly, I hit the brakes. The car was parked among the stunted bushes of Keireuk. There was no track. I felt cold, but I managed to pull myself together. Do not panic. I couldn't drive off very far. Now I will return to the track on my own tread marks. But alas, turning the car around, I was convinced and confirmed that the hard and rock-hard sunburned soil had almost no tread marks. Cursing, I climbed under the roof and began to look around. Nothing. Finally, far away at the very horizon line, I saw a tiny black dot and immediately remembered that the next beacon should be the rusty cabin of the Zeal Auto. Obviously, this is it. I got back behind the wheel and drove forward. Soon the salt marsh ended, and after a couple of 100 meters, I drove out onto the track. It led in the right direction to the marked point, and all my doubts disappeared. The black speck grew before my eyes. But it was not the cabin of the Zeal, but the skeleton of the Ural general-purpose all-terrain vehicle, blackened and crumpled. There were about 50 meters to the Ural when my car stalled. I looked out of the window and I was stunned. The car was sitting on the axle in a gray-yellow crumbly sand. Sand was spread everywhere. Absorbed in my thoughts, I noticed it too late. And another thing, the track ended here, end of the road. Dead end. I was simply following the tracks of a lost truck. Be afraid of the sands immediately flashed into my mind, and for some reason it seemed that Kurban put a special meaning into these words, not only a warning about the danger of getting stalled. I got out again and looked around. The car got stuck firmly. It was necessary to put something under the wheels, but what? Will it be possible to tear off some kind of thing from the Ural, some kind of piece? I took the crowbar and moved to the wrecked car. No wooden parts were preserved in the deformed body. No benches, no side pieces. I walked around it, figuring out what to pick up with this crowbar. And then there was the dry rustling behind. I turned around. Something incomprehensible was happening. It seems that a section of the surface has spontaneously mixed. But the next second, I was terrified, and an unprecedented creature of mottled, earthy colors, diamond-shaped, flat as a stingray, was approaching the Volga with very undulating, rolling movements. Its size on a large diagonal was at least 4 meters. Dozens of tentacles, like small snakes, were moving around the perimeter, but the creature had no paws, no eyes, no mouth. My legs were rooted to the body, my spine turned into a stone pillar. Meanwhile, the creature folded into a disgusting roll and crawled under the bottom. Then it unfolded like a nightmarish envelope and completely enveloped the car. There was a crunch, windows flew out, The case cracked. The plasticity of the monster was incredible. It easily folded up like a giant lump of paper. Tentacles were groping around the cabin, devouring my supplies. Time seemed to have stopped. I still couldn't move or exhale. Finally, the monster fell off the car. The beautiful Volga turned into a crumpled and blackened piece of iron, and the creature noticeably thickened, circled on the spot, and easily slid into my footsteps. When I came to my senses, I yelled, threw the crowbar at the sand stingray, and jumping off on the other side of the Ural body, began to climb up the slope. I was afraid to turn around. There was a terrible rustling in my ears. I was drenched in cold sweat, imagining how the slimy mass would pile on me. I was on the verge of madness and was rushing, not taking apart the road from hill to hill. I got up, and ran again. My heart was jumping out of my chest, but my legs, guided by instinct, carried me away from the dangerous place. Finally, my strength left me. I fell and fainted. When I woke up, it was the dead of the night. The stars were burning in the sky, but the space was saturated with such thick darkness that I could not distinguish the tip of my own nose. Well, I was lucky. I managed to miraculously avoid death, but I was left without water, food, and transportation. Besides, I got lost. According to my estimates, I was in the center of the plateau, in its unexplored depths, which means that my chances of getting out were zero. The narrator took a deep breath. For 3 days I wandered at random, burying all hope, and suddenly a miracle, camels coming straight at me. He smiled bitterly. Yes, but what joy do I have? What will I tell the car owner? How will I pay? We need to find Kurban. He knows. The train locomotive's horn sounded. The train was going back to Kungrad. We invited our guests to go there, since both the driver and the seller were well known to us. Alec readily agreed, and we saw him off, collecting some money for the road. Over the long dinner, we discussed the story we had heard for a long time. At first, they said that there were a lot of unknown mysteries and wonders still on Earth, and Ustyurt, which we basically touched only from the edge, was certainly no exception. But soon healthy skepticism took over. We agreed that Alec really fell asleep at the wheel and turned over or crashed the car, and then that he made up a tall tale to somehow justify himself to the boss. A driver's fable, so to say. An even more pragmatic account was put forward by our foreman Ilya Zagudilin. This guy is a big sly guy. That's what I'll tell you. Yes, he just sold the car at an exorbitant price to some local chaban, shepherd. At that time, for some reason, it was believed that every shepherd had a bag of money. The shepherd gave him an escort to Kungrad, and now he's obfuscating things. So, that was settled. Later, both in Kungrad and in Chimbai and in Takhataksha and in Khozheli, Nechiporenko persistently asked the locals about the sand monster, but they only shrugged their shoulders in bewilderment. For many years, Nechiporenko put the driver's story out of his head, out of his mind. But 10 years later, when Nechiporenko was safely living in Tashkent, fate brought him together with an interesting man, geologist Sasha Suspentsov, who walked almost the whole of Central Asia. Once, over a bottle of excellent Ock Musalas, they started talking about Ustyurt, from where Sasha had just returned. Suddenly, Nechiporenko remembered the old story and he retold it to the friend. Sasha is a well-known ridiculer, and Nechiporenko expected, if not an explosion of laughter, then certainly sarcastic remarks. But Sasha listened to him seriously, and when Nechiporenko finished, he thought about it. You know, he said at last, the nomads have a taboo against any mention of mysterious forces, so as not to invite trouble to their yurt. Even if the sand stingray exists, no one will say anything about it. I have never heard of anything like this, although I have talked a lot with nomads. By the way, sandy massifs, and quite extensive, are not uncommon in Ustyurt. But listen, what a story happened once. We were drilling an exploration well to the southwest of the Sarikamish Depression. One day, two of our people went hunting for saigaks. By nightfall, they had not returned. We had a helicopter, and in the morning, we embarked on a search. The car was found about 60 kilometers to the west. It was blackened and crumpled like a tin can. Guns were lying nearby, no butts, and the gun barrels were tied into knots. Nearby stretched a large sandy massif. Sasha looked Nechiporenko straight in the eye and added, "If ever some mischief takes you to Ustyurt again, be afraid of the sands." So this is the story I wanted to let you know today, and I will add a link to the video I made probably a year ago about a very interesting and very similar encounter that the Soviet soldiers had in another Central Asian country. And it was decades before this one. See if you can find similarities. And maybe you will understand that sometimes people disappear in desert and other objects too. Not only people, but cars and so forth, without a trace. I kind of want to find out more about Namibia. I want to go back to Africa because I've heard other stories about other places. And Namibia seems to be a very interesting place to confirm that. So maybe one day. If you like my research and you can support it, by all means, please do so. You'll find the links in the description to this video, and I will keep bringing you interesting tales, encounters, and stories from Eurasia and other parts of the world. But Ustyurt, definitely see my other videos, because there were other objects, very interesting ones, observed there during the years of the Soviet Union. And there were exploration of the area, very interesting. I don't want to spoil your attention. So please like my videos, please subscribe to my channel, please tell others about it. Thank you.